Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us. BC Premier David Eby says the province will launch its own U.S. ad campaign against President Trump's unfair and absurd lumber tariffs, despite Trump cutting off trade talks with Canada last week over Ontario's similar campaign. But will this move inflame Trump more? And the provincial government's new driver licensing changes will scrap the second road test, instead just requiring 2 years with no tickets. But is this a move towards safer roads, or should we hit the brakes on the plan? I'm Amy Bell in for Michelle Elliott, and this is BC Today. And thank you, as always, for joining us here on radio, TV, and live stream. And you can call us now on our top story. Should BC go ahead with its planned anti-tariff ads? Our number is 604-669-3733. You can also reach us at 1-800-825-5950 or hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email us at bctoday@cbc.ca. And U.S. trade war retaliation is not swaying BC Premier David Eby to pull BC's plans to air its own anti-tariff advertisements to American audiences. Over the weekend, Trump announced a 10% increase on what he called the, quote, the tariff on Canada, following Ontario's ad featuring Ronald Reagan. The new duty is thin on details for now, but Eby says he is unambiguously supporting Ontario's campaign, and BC's own ads will push ahead. He says BC's message will address the impact of softwood lumber tariffs on Canadians.
I think it's vital to get the word out to Americans. The entire idea behind Premier Ford's advertising campaign, although I acknowledge ours was a decidedly different scale, is to get the message out to Americans about the impact of tariffs on Americans. The only people paying the additional 10% that the president announced the other day are Americans. Their prices are going to go up. They are going to feel the impact directly. And getting that message to Americans as well as American decision makers is crucial. We are going to exercise all of our ability to get the word out, including advertising to Americans. We reserve the right to do that.
That was Premier David Eby. So we're asking you, should BC go ahead with running its anti-tariff ad campaign in the U.S.? How worried are you about President Trump retaliating when these BC NDP anti-tariff ads go through? Call us now. Just hit pound 690 on your cell phone or call 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or email bctoday@cbc.ca. You can also leave a comment on our TikTok Live. Joining us now for more on this discussion is Diamond Isinger. She is a political strategist and former advisor for Canada-U.S. relations for the Prime Minister's office. Good afternoon, Diamond. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
So we just saw Premier Eby say it's vital to kind of get the word out to Americans about how tariffs will affect them. What's your take on this?
It's a tricky spot for the BC government to be in. Obviously, they're concerned about the effects on BC's economy of this continued trade instability with the United States. Mm-hmm. They're trying to follow a similar playbook as executed by Ontario in terms of reaching Americans where they're at, reaching everyday audiences, mm-hmm. because that will resonate far more with the U.S. administration than a Canadian voice ever will. With that said, it's a pretty risky opportunity at this point, especially after having seen the fallout of the most recent ads.
Well, and that's just it, because we did see what happened, when President Trump reacted to Ontario's ads last week. He took to social media saying that as a result of the ad, he would be imposing a further 10% tariff on Canadian goods. Were you expecting him to work this way or to react that way? We're not unsurprised when he has an emotional reaction to something, but were you expecting it to hit that hard?
I think so. It's hard to say. I mean, he's simultaneously quite predictable in terms of the playbook that's used and deeply unpredictable.
Well, unpredictability is predictable, I suppose.
Well, and the most complex thing about this latest pronouncement from the president in terms of the 10% add-on to what he describes as existing tariffs on Canada is we actually, even now, days later, have no idea what that means. Yeah. And I don't know that you can ask any American administration official what that means either.
Right.
Is that 10% on what rate from before on which products. This is a pretty consistent playbook where we've seen the president threaten or state that he is going to impose additional tariffs, but it takes a really long time to calculate what that actually looks like if it ever actually does come into effect.
And I suppose there is that factor that perhaps Premier Eby is relying on, is that there are quite often these threats of retaliation or threats of action that don't seem to go much further. And so I suppose it's risk management, seeing, if you can get bang for your buck and raise awareness and hopefully not have to deal with too much fallout.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, the softwood lumber issue, though, especially, is a decades-long irritant between Canada and the U.S. While I wouldn't say at all that Trump is a champion of resolving this issue in the short term, we've seen this across Democratic administrations, Republican administrations. I recall working in government for the trade minister in 2016, and we were having talks with the U.S. trade representative around the softwood lumber agreement at that point under Obama. And so this is a recurring challenge with the U.S. Now, the instability that we're feeling more generally, coupled with the fact that domestically we have so many challenges in the forestry sector. You're seeing mills be curtailed in their operations or closing altogether. You're seeing regulatory environments in terms of provincial or federal government policy that are affecting how forestry companies are able to operate in BC. All those layers layered onto each other is perhaps also equaling additional pressure for the BC government to act as and seem to be acting as well.
All right. We'll get a couple calls in now from Roman in Port Alberni. Hi, Roman. Thanks for joining BC today.
Good afternoon. Lovely day.
For the Ducks, sure. So what are your thoughts on BC going ahead with these anti-tariff ads?
Even if this whole task is a performative move strategically, we must be very, very cognizant that the U.S. is not an audience of one. There should be other players sitting at the table, local, regional, state politicians and lawmakers and, the state representatives per se. Also, the big business and all the ones that would be crossing the border to do business with us need to be mindful of what their goals should be too. And I think we need to always keep the tariffs front and center on their radars respectively. So the U.S. is not an audience of one. Trump is not, he's not everything.
All right, Roman, thank you for that point of view. And Diamond, what would you say to that we really need to be paying attention to these tariffs and the wider spectrum of who has influence in the States?
Yeah, I completely agree with Roman, and that has been the consistent playbook, both of the new Carney government as well as the previous Trudeau government. The idea that we need to reach as many people as early and often as possible in the U.S. with this message. You saw the former Prime Minister. We would regularly plan trips to the United States to speak to governors, to speak to decision makers across the U.S. And Prime Minister Carney has most recently been undertaking meetings with business leaders in the United States, multinational companies, both to attract investment to Canada, but also hopefully reach people who have voices in the ear of the president or people around him to help influence them towards getting to a more stable and predictable spot with Canada.
We'll go to Jeannie in Winlaw. Hi, Jeannie.
Hi.
Hi. How do you feel about these anti-tariff ads?
I don't feel anything about them because I believe we have so many houses to build here. Why aren't we just using the lumber here?
All right, Jeannie, I appreciate that point of view. We'll also get another call in from Mohammed in Victoria. Hi, Mohammed.
Hello. Thank you for taking my call.
Oh, well, thank you for joining us. So what are your thoughts on the anti-tariff ads?
Well, I mean, similar to what happened in Ontario, it's a double-edged sword. If it actually ends up getting into the idiot's the idiot's profile that we're running these ads, it may cause a reaction. But we need to make sure we educate the public in the U.S. And that is an important part of it. I don't think we should not do it because of his reaction to what happened in Ontario. I think we need to keep hitting consistently across the board. He constantly lies and says everything is fake. And that the ads that Ottawa, Ontario was running about Reagan is false. I mean, it's not false. It's in the public record. And we have to keep hitting this because he does not, I don't think he clearly understands what tariffs actually mean in the end. And we know that he's a reactionary. He doesn't think about what he does. He just reacts and does something. He gets something in his mind and he does it. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it makes any sense. The public in the U.S. needs to understand the stupidity of his actions and at some point start fighting back. I mean, the MAGA people are not going to change their mind regardless of what happens. But the rest of the public, we need to influence them.
All right. Thank you for that point of view, Mohammed. And Diamond, there has been speculation and talk that that there needs to be more of an understanding of what the tariffs actually mean to the American public, that a tariff on us is actually a tax on the U.S. Population. Is this going to help to sort of shift that mindset? Could these ads, at the risk of any retaliation from Trump, have the greater good of educating U.S. citizens of what these tariffs actually do to their pocketbooks?
Yeah, a tactic that I think has actually been forgotten from 2025, from early this year under the Trudeau government, is there was an ad campaign that was waged by the federal government with the message, tariffs are a tax on everyday Americans. And those were focused on reaching people in plainer language in their communities about what that means for them and their jobs and their household budgets, the cost of groceries, the fact that perhaps the manufacturing facility that they work at will be unable to operate without the inputs that they require from Canada. So that message has resonated at different points and has been seen as helpful and strategic. I think the question at play here, especially in light of Eby now plotting BC's own advertising, is this the tactic that makes sense for this moment and going forward? And that's an ongoing calculus. I think it's even a little bit challenging for the BC government to claim legitimately in recent days to deploy this next month. Who knows what's going to happen in the coming days or weeks into November, and if this is still a sound approach when, for example, perhaps the federal government signals that they're on the cusp of an agreement again with the United States,
so
and this would blow that up.
Then you don't want to poke the bear. And then ask the question of if these ads from the Trudeau government went ahead, why didn't they land? Why did they not sort of push that momentum of people understanding what the tariffs mean for U.S. citizens? Well, we've got a lot of calls on this, so we'll take some more. One from Gay in Haida Gwaii. Hi, Gay.
Hi there.
Hi, how are you feeling about things?
I just have just a couple of words to say. We need to stand on our own 2 feet. We're quite capable. When I say we, I mean Canada. Now, the United States is below us, right? And he thinks he can dominate the world. But as far as I'm concerned, we should dump the Trump and carry on our own and do what we know is right, Canada. That's all I have to say.
All right, Gay, thank you so much for that. And
Thank you.
Gay pointing out, which many Canadians have been saying really since Trump has been putting in these punishing tariffs, is we need to be less reliant on the U.S. But how realistic is that?
Well, it's a message that's been echoed consistently by the Prime Minister as well. He was elected, and a Liberal government was brought back in with the promise to strengthen our economy and also to focus on the things within our own control. That's been a message that the Prime Minister has consistently offered. How do we, for example, dismantle barriers to internal trade within Canada? How do we do more business with each other? The Prime Minister right now is in Asia, meeting with a variety of world leaders on the sidelines of several international summits to talk about how we build further trade, for example, with the Indo-Pacific regions and huge booming populations and markets over there that are largely untapped as of now by Canada. So I agree that we can focus on these things. And if anything, the pressures from the U.S. have helped galvanize Canadians around that agenda. We, for example, didn't really see a lot of enthusiasm from premiers up until 2025 to deal with internal trade barriers, things like moving wine between provinces or
it was
helping
stuck for years.
Exactly.
And then how quickly it can get done when everybody bands together.
Absolutely. The pressure, having that external threat in some ways has helped us be a little bit more cohesive in terms of the priority put on strengthening that economy and making sure that we do more business for and with ourselves.
And, in terms of that unity, is there something to be said in premiers and provinces having a more sort of connected and concerted effort against Trump, as opposed to, we saw Doug Ford putting out some messaging on behalf of Ontario. Now Eby's doing the same for BC. Do these sort of independent blows have much of an impact if all of them could come together with one message?
That is the main question here. How do we have a cohesive Team Canada? How do we make sure that provinces feel that their needs and their concerns are being represented by the federal government, and that the federal government feels that they're being backed up by the provinces? There's definitely an argument that can be made, and that has been made in recent days, about whether or not Premier Ford's actions, sort of exceeded his authority or autonomy as a subnational government leader, as a Premier of Ontario. Does that undermine the position of the federal government, whose job it is to deal with international partners like the United States? And that's where the BC Premier as well will need to continue to weigh the advantages or disadvantages of going out on his own versus being part of a coordinated approach. Appreciating, though, too, that there's a bit of an onus on the federal government, though, to put forward that strategic approach to make sure that provinces feel engaged, are meaningfully engaged, and that they feel that they have a stake in where the government's going in negotiations and conversations.
Okay, we'll get a few more calls in. This one from Dale in Mill Bay. Hi, Dale.
How are you doing this morning? Thanks for taking my call.
Oh, thanks for calling in. What are your thoughts today?
Well, I would say that in light of President Trump's reaction to Doug Ford's ad, and the fact that Ontario is hurting just like the rest of the country, could that $75 million not been put to better use in Ontario? And so that's the same question I would have of Premier Eby.
Okay.
Whatever money he's planning to spend on this ad that may or may not do anything more than tick Trump off even greater, could that money not be put to better use? I mean, you drive down any street in Victoria and you see derelict people. Duncan's the same. Nanaimo's horrible. You go further up island and it's just disgusting. I live on Vancouver Island. And the numbers of people who are hurting financially because they can't make ends meet, people working 3, 4 jobs, 5 jobs, they can't buy groceries. Come on, seriously, premiers, put the money where it's going to do the most good. And that is not in some cockamamie ad to try and tick off the President of the United States, because that's not going to get you anywhere except more tariffs, obviously.
All right, Dale, I thank you for calling in and joining us. And, Dale, reiterating what others have said about the enormous price that goes into these ads if it cannot be money well spent elsewhere. I do want to get a couple more calls in. Our lines are full, so thanks to everybody calling in. Kira in Williams Lake, how are you doing?
Hi.
Hi.
I'm well.
And how do you feel about this plan for the ads to go out in BC?
I agree with your last caller 100%. I just get mad every time I hear an advertisement from the government. It's just a waste of money. Government should be providing services for citizens. Like, for example, we don't have hardly any doctors around here. I've been without a doctor for 5 years now. Let's use our money wisely instead of dumping it down the drain on advertisements.
All right, thank you so much for that. And you are being joined by Jonathan McDreamy on TikTok saying, pull the ads, he's killing the forest. And Film Gamer says, we shouldn't be afraid of Trump. We need to stand up, not sit down. What are your thoughts, Diamond, on using that money elsewhere, that it could be better spent to prop up services and support for people?
We don't know yet what the cost of a BC ad campaign will look like.
Yeah.
They've already signaled that if it moves ahead, it's at a much, much smaller scale. It's digital display type ads, not major World Series TV buys. But at the same time, not to sound dismissive, of course, because millions of dollars are real everyday dollars. When we're talking about the trade-off between billions of dollars and economic impact on Canada,
Right, it's
the
that.
jobs, the opportunity, like to the point of the callers that have been made, of having additional funding to cover social services, for example. Those funds come from economic development and activity in BC and in Canada. So if anything, it may be more of an investment actually in further stability and certainty, but with the caveats of what we've discussed, which is this is a risky prospect of launching any new ads at this point.
It is. It's that short versus long game and weighing the options. We've got time for one more call, I think, from Linda in Nelson. Hi, Linda.
Oh, hi there. Thanks for taking my call. Yes, I'm a little leery of Mr. Eby's ad, although it's going to be different and it's only going to, I don't think Mr. Trump will see it. It will just focus on the west side of the U.S. I get a lot of my news items from late night comedy shows, and I thought, it'll be just a flutter with all kinds of things about Canada. It was just a couple of blurbs, nothing at all. So I don't really think it's getting the impact that Mr. Ford is saying it's getting. I think it was a risk that was not worth taking, especially for that kind of money, and especially for Donald Trump. He's like Teflon right now. Nothing sticks to him. Right. The stuff that he's doing to his own citizens, I mean, they should be screaming. Nobody's really, they're dressing up and hopping around and stuff. He's dancing right now in Asia. They had on the red carpet, and he was doing his usual crazy dance, and they're just focused on that. The Americans are lapping it up. I think we have more to lose than to gain with these ads. I really do. And I think the Americans are well aware of, the softwood lumber and everything else. They're not pleased. I've spoken to Americans just doing seed orders in the spring.
Linda, I'm so sorry. We're going to have to leave it there because we are right out of time and up against the news. But thank you so much for joining in, and thank you to everybody that called in. I think we're probably going to have to revisit this topic when it comes up, whether or not the ads even go forward. But Diamond, so great to have you with us today.
Thank you.
That was Diamond Isinger. She's a political strategist and former Canada-U.S. advisor to the Prime Minister's office. It is 12:27, almost 12:28, and this is BC Today. A BC Conservative MLA is moving to strengthen BC's Intimate Images Act, which are meant to protect people from the distribution of non-consensual images. Misty Van Popta, the MLA for Langley Walnut Grove, says she was prompted by her daughter Amelia, who fell to an intimate photo being shared without her consent when she was 15 years old. Amelia, who is now 20, joined Van Popta on the early edition this morning.
It was confusing at the time, especially being so young. I mean, you don't really understand the dynamics of something like this. And I mean, I definitely didn't think it would result in anything near to what it has become even years later. So, I mean, it's confusing. It's hard to process so young and before you've really figured out ways that work for yourself.
When this bill was tabled last month, I obviously was very interested in the contents of it. And so I did a lot of reading and deep diving into what was presented in that bill. And it was strengthening, obviously, the original bill in ways that that victims could go through a civil process, which I think is a fantastic avenue. I have received messages from people who have had the threat of intimate images being shared, and just feeling helpless and not knowing whether there's a civil avenue, even as adults. And there is now, which I think is a fantastic move.
This is BC Today on CBC. We're on Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming on our website, cbc.ca/BC. I'm Amy Bell, sitting in today for Michelle Elliott, and coming up in the second half, we're going to talk about changes to the graduated licensing system here in BC. But first, it's time for the CBC News to 12:30 with Rob Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. For the second time in less than 48 hours, police in Kamloops are investigating a suspicious fire on the city's North Shore. Firefighters were called to a home in the 300 block of Alexander Avenue shortly after 11 last night. 2 people had to be treated in hospital. Police continue to investigate Sunday's arson that forced the temporary closure of Westmount Elementary School. North Vancouver RCMP say a suspect has been arrested after a series of tire slashings in the Lynn Valley area over the weekend. Investigators are aware of at least 16 incidents. The RCMP say they were able to identify the suspect after reviewing CCTV video. And avian flu continues to spread in the Fraser Valley. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency says the virus has been detected in 9 commercial poultry flocks over the last 2 weeks. They mark the first new outbreaks confirmed in the province since last January. And now the forecast. Wind warnings continue for many sections of the coast and Vancouver Island. A snowfall warning is in place for Pine Pass along Highway 97, and a blowing snow alert is in effect for the Okanagan Connector. Elsewhere on the north coast, rain this afternoon with strong winds and a high of 8. Highs around +1 with a chance of flurries in the Peace. In the central interior, rain this afternoon with a high of 3. Highs up to 7 and mainly cloudy in the West Kootenay, a bit of sunshine in the East Kootenay. In the southern interior, a chance of showers with a high of 8. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria and the Fraser Valley, rain or showers this afternoon, windy in some areas with highs from 9 to 12. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Quite a game last night, Robert.
Oh.
Have you dried your tears?
Yeah.
Did you get any sleep?
I didn't get much. No, I actually bailed in the middle of the 18th.
This is too much.
I had a bad feeling. Yeah, that was a tough finish.
I think some people in my family might have ulcers by the end of the series.
Yeah,
but
it's
go
exciting.
Jays.
That's why we watch.
Yeah, we love it. It's great.
Great to have that tension boiling up inside us, right?
Okay. Yes. Just get some Pepto. You'll be fine. Thank you, Robert. And thank you for joining us on CBC Television, live streaming, of course, on cbc.ca. And yes, the Toronto Blue Jays are looking to even the score tonight after taking a 6-5 loss in yesterday's game against the LA Dodgers. It was a marathon, 18-inning game that lasted a record 6 hours and 39 minutes. Here's Blue Jays manager John Schneider on what Toronto is up against with baseball megastar Shohei Ohtani.
You know, his performance was really good. You know, he's arguably the best player on the planet, you know. I think he kind of reacted in real time a little bit. You know, again, man, they have a really talented lineup. You know, it's not the easiest thing in the world to just walk him and face Mookie and Freddie. You know what I mean? So every situation is different. You know, you gotta really execute at a high level against him.
Ohtani hit stunning home runs at the start of the game last night, but in the end, it was Freddie Freeman, a dual citizen who represents Canada internationally, who hit the home run to victory for LA. And now the Jays will have to recover very quickly for an important matchup tonight. Shohei Ohtani will take the mound at LA's starting pitcher in Game 4. And the BC government is considering changes to the province's graduated license program to start early next year. If the legislation is passed, it means new drivers wouldn't need to take a second road test to get rid of their N decal and get a full Class 5 license. They would just have to avoid getting a ticket for 24 months, and then they can get their full license. And while the move is intended to help ease the long wait times for testing, it is raising concerns that more unskilled or inexperienced drivers will be on the roads, and some critics are wanting the government to pump the brakes on their plans. So what do you think? Should BC eliminate the N driving test, the second test? And how do we make our roads safe? Call us now. Just hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also call 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. And you can email bctoday@cbc.ca or leave a comment on our TikTok Live. And joining us for more on this topic is Han Chan, the MLA for Richmond Centre and the opposition critic for ICBC. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me today.
And we're also joined by Mihai Cirstea with Vision Zero Vancouver, a non-profit organization advocating for zero deaths and serious injuries on Metro Vancouver streets. Hello, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me as well.
So, Han, I'm going to start with you. You
Sure.
have raised concerns about removing that second road test. That would mean if the road test is meant for driving safety, to make sure people are at that level.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you opposed to the province removing that second road test?
Right. Good question. Thanks for having me today. Well, we actually asked the minister what's the intention. And we know the intention is to actually improve accessibility and also remove the backlog when you started the program. Because some of the backlog, we're talking about 6 months wait in some jurisdiction, and we understand the intention. And if canceling the second test would not compromise road safety, I am totally fine with it. However, so when we asked the minister and the staff for about the statistic about removing a second test, they gave us a very good result. 95% of the people actually passed the second test, but there's a catch in the first and second attempt. So I was like, no, give me the number for the first attempt, because these are the people who were already driving on the road for 2 years. And they came back a little while, said 68%, only 68% of the people actually passed the second test. So when we do some math, that's 32%, almost 1/3 of the people who, under the new law, will actually automatically grant a full license without restrictions, but they can't even pass the second test. So we were actually skeptical. We were worried about 1/3 of the people who actually failed the second test will get the full license in the new law. That's something that we were quite concerned of.
And it is. It's, when you think of how many people haven't taken their second test yet, but when they do, that nearly 1/3 of them can't pass. Is that a matter of they buckle under the pressure of this test, or if they just haven't had the experience or nor the rules? Mihai, I'd like to get your take on it, and I apologize, I mispronounced your last name. It's Cirstea, I believe. So
No problem.
Please accept my apology. What are the biggest red flags that you have with this proposed change to be rid of that second test? And it just means you wouldn't get a speeding test. You wouldn't get a speeding ticket. You wouldn't get any other tickets in that 24-month period.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know. I don't know if the two-test system is the best. I don't know what the best system for training drivers is. What I do know is 300 people a year are killed on BC roads. So if the NDP want to take away the road test, fine, present evidence that it won't jeopardize safety. Present an alternative plan to make our roads safer. And honestly, they haven't done either of those. So the fact that this is the place that they want to spend their political capital when it comes to road safety, to do something that arguably makes our roads more dangerous and nothing else to replace it, I think is super disappointing.
In terms of making more safe, though, we do still have these drivers that have their ends before they take their second test. There's no onus that they must take the second test. They can still drive with that N licensing. So whether they take the test or not, they're still on the road. So how does that impact safety? I'll ask that of you, Han, first.
Sure. Actually, we asked that question to the ministry because we understand that there are quite a large percentage of who would never take the second test. But remember, there's a restriction on their license. You have to have a zero alcohol blood content. You can only drive 1%. That's a harm reduction way. Make sure if you injure somebody or fatally injure somebody, you can only take one person. I'm sorry, but not instead of 7 people in an SUV. But also they have an N sticker in the back, so people will give them more leeway. I personally, when I see a N driver, I would give them more rooms and give them more patience, right? So I think the restrictions is in place. But remember, when these restrictions are not in place, then these are the people who might danger our road. And I agree so much with Mihai.
Fair enough. And Mihai, how do you respond to that these people are on the roads regardless if they take that second test?
No, I completely agree with everything that was just said. And the other thing is that I don't think that the current system, even with 2 tests, is good enough training for drivers. I mean, I think if you ask anyone who drives or walks around the streets today, do drivers need more or less training? I think you're going to hear everyone say, yeah, the drivers on the streets today need more training. So I don't even think the status quo is good enough, and to make it even less training is just the wrong direction.
So we're moving in the wrong direction. There needs to be perhaps more barriers to getting that final license.
I just want to add something that because right now, under the new law, you don't need, as long as you don't have a speeding ticket or any infractions, you will get it. So we have no idea. We don't track their driving record. We don't know after the first test, do they actually drive? For example, in other jurisdiction with only 1 test in Australia, the coach or the driving certified driving coach has to sign off like a 50 minimum hour or 125 minimum hour in order for you to miss the second test or they do not have a second test.
Okay.
But we do not have that here. And they don't plan to have this kind of change.
All right, thank you for making that point. We've got a lot of calls that have come in, so I want to get to them.
Sure.
First one will be Ian in Victoria. What are your thoughts on these changes to how you get your driver's license?
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I think it's really kind of a bad idea. I mean, you can have a new driver who basically doesn't do a lot of driving at all in those 24 months. Versus somebody who gets their in and does quite a bit of driving and therefore gains experience. So the one who doesn't do a lot of driving will automatically get their full license without having a whole lot of hours or time or experience with driving. So I think it's vitally important that before you can graduate to a full license that you have to pass a test.
All right, thank you for that, and that sort of echoes what you were saying, that we need to have proof that you've put in those hours, that you've logged that experience that we just don't have here in BC. Nicholas in Vancouver, what are your thoughts on any changes that could occur to licensing?
So I think that in between the time somebody takes their N test and in that 2-year period where they would then be able to get their full license, I think there's a lot of time for bad habits in drivers to form. And I've seen this in my own life. And I think that the final test is a good way to eliminate some of those bad habits by having drivers go through a secondary examination. And I think that by losing out on that test, there's going to be the potential for drivers who maybe have some incorrect driving habits to then be on the road carrying passengers with a full license.
All right, thank you for that. And Mihai, you were, I saw you agreeing with that, bad habits do form quite quickly and there won't be this stopgap to sort of tell people what they're doing is wrong.
Absolutely, and not only that, if you know you'll never have to take another test in your life, you're not even thinking about whether you're developing those habits. You just don't care. You're scot-free. I mean, you have to avoid getting a ticket, but like Han said, you might just not even drive for 2 years. And also the amount of enforcement on our roads is actually incredibly low anyways. Like you could actually commit a lot of infractions and just luckily never get a ticket. So yeah, it's just not sufficient.
We'll take a call from Kevin in Trail. Hi, Kevin. What are your thoughts on today's topic? Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
I believe that I haven't done the survey, but I do believe that perhaps they shouldn't have to take a second license.
Okay.
I'm thinking that everyone perhaps should be tested every 10 years, especially a lot of seniors, and I'm a senior. I've seen a lot of bad driving by seniors. And so to pick on any one group when they've actually passed the road test and make them do it twice,
No, I actually appreciate you bringing that up, Kevin, and that is something that I wanted to ask both of you. I'll start with you, Han. Is the way we sort of look at it, where we're really focusing on new drivers, young drivers, and assigning them perhaps, rightly or unrightly so, blame for a lot of trouble, when we have a lot of bad drivers out there and a lot of bad habits that can develop unchecked
I
at
agree.
any age. So do we need to really rethink how we approach licensing in general for all?
I think that's a very good topic because when we actually look at online posts, I've seen Facebook groups, there are lots of really bad driving habits or really bad examples online. And also, I actually do agree with, I think it's Kevin mentioned, do we need more tests every 10 years? And also one thing that we need to know, is there any good changes going to be made on the first test? Because when I asked the ministry, the second test in many jurisdictions, the component is actually different. There's like a highway portion in the second test and where there's none in the first test. So is there any changes to the first test? But the minister was not able to give me any definite answer if there's changes, make it more difficult or make it more challenging for the first test. After the second test is removed, we do not know those answers. And I want to echo what Mihai mentioned that without getting a ticket doesn't mean you're a good driver. It just means you didn't get caught, right? You didn't do a shoulder check, you turned right and you didn't turn to the rightmost lane. You didn't get a ticket for that. But that is potentially quite dangerous for the road. So I think the second test is a safeguard to all these bad habits that they have developed after the first passing the first test. And without that, just because you didn't get a ticket, doesn't mean you're a good driver.
Okay. And Mihai, do you think perhaps we should be looking at all drivers and not just new drivers when it comes to more enforcement or maybe more regular check-ins to see what habits have developed?
I do think so. It's a complicated issue. It's complicated how to implement that, but I do think so. I mean, you can get your full license at 18, and you can be driving until you're 80 and never have a test again. In that time, the rules of the road change. The vehicle's size and power has gotten so much greater. Can people still operate these vehicles, 60 years after taking a test? And not to discriminate against any group, but I think that some sort of regular testing to make sure people are adapting to the rules and to the vehicles on the road does make a lot of sense.
All right, thank you for that. We'll get a line or call in now from line 1, Devo in Vancouver. Hi, Devo.
Hi there, Michelle. How you doing? Thanks for having me on.
No problem. What are your thoughts?
No, they're going backwards. No, there should be more restrictions. And more restrictions on existing drivers, new drivers coming from out of province, new drivers coming from out of country. And also, and I've put a whole package together that I've sent to many different governments over the years and never got a response because they're too scared of what I've had to say is going to cause, voter scaring. And what should happen is, every 5 years, I think it was just mentioned, every 5 years you go in and you get your license renewed, no questions asked. And what it should be is every 5 years you have to take a road test. And if you're under 25, you have to take the road test every year. And if you're over 75, the road test every year.
All right.
There's way too many bad driving habits. I live on Victoria Drive. Outside my house last year, there were 8 accidents at the intersection, 6 of them I witnessed, and there was an accident in 2016 where I'm almost killed by a driver who went out of control, hit the stop sign, and landed on the fence 10 feet from where I was standing. This person was an international student. He was from Washington State, and they had given him a license within 3 months of him being in Washington State.
All right.
And that was a real hassle. That was a real hassle because he was from out of state.
I can imagine,
out of
Devo.
country.
I can imagine.
Out of country. Yeah, out of country.
It is very different, Devo. I will have to leave it there as that's, I think, an entirely different conversation. But in terms of just making sure that there are more checks for everyone, I think that's something that most people are agreeing on today. Mihai, in your work with Vision Zero Vancouver, I mean, you want to make sure streets are safer for everyone, for drivers, for pedestrians, for cyclists. What do you see as the biggest risks on our roads right now?
I mean, the biggest risk is just the fact that our roads are designed for speed over people's safety. They're designed, for people to go fast, to get where they're going fast. There's basically almost no enforcement. There's very little investment in active transportation. I think there's so much the government could be doing, the provincial government. They could be expanding red light and speed cameras. They could be funding more active transportation. They could be doing something, honestly, this is a bit controversial, but vehicles are so large these days. They're unnecessarily large. You see crazy things like the Cybertruck, but also just a lot of the cars are getting too big, and they could do something through ICBC, make it way more expensive to insure these cars because they're just straight up deadlier. So yeah, I'd like to see a lot more being done.
All right. We did get an email. It says we should only be increasing the requirements to drive, not decreasing them. We need mandatory, intense training and a difficult testing regime. Right now, it is very clear that the bar to get a license is far too low. Anybody with a pulse can seemingly get a license here. Thank you very much. That was from Trust. And Han, one thing that ICBC has sought to address is the lack of accessibility for getting that second test, not just due to the backlog and the wait logs, but for many rural communities, Indigenous communities. This has been something that has been a huge barrier. How do we address that issue?
Yeah, good question. We actually asked that question to the minister. We're asking, hey, now you want to improve your accessibility and also remove the backlog, which is quite long, and also in the rural community and for Indigenous communities. Why are we not looking into improving our capacity and also mobile testing? We should be looking at these capacity, ability to do mobile testing more in rural area instead of just removing the safeguard. So I think the government is actually getting a shortcut here by removing the second test so that they can remove the backlog, improve the accessibility, and also let everybody have their full license easier.
Okay.
Yeah.
We do have a call in now from Henry in Port Moody. Hi, Henry. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. Hi, Michelle. Yeah, I know they want to get rid of the N, but the L still needs a lot of work. Motorbikes, you get your license and get an L, and you're free to go on a bike by yourself. I lost my son's best friend that way.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Gone. So, you know, there's a lot of work on the L part. There's no mistake. You make a mistake on a motorbike, there's no airbags or nothing. And his mom didn't want him to have the bike, and he got it anyway. So, because it's legal, you know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work to do, especially with motorcycles like L. I don't know what to say with that one, but that's my point.
All right. Thank you so
in
much.
In the bill, actually, there's the MLP, which is the motorcycle. That is the only one part that we actually agree on, because in the L, and I'm a motorcycle rider myself, in the L and N, now they include a clause saying that you have to have protective gear. And before you don't have to. You can be in T-shirts, you can be in shorts, but now they have to include the protective gear. And I think that is one step forward, at least in that bill.
And just to clarify, for the motorcycle testing, you can get your full license after at least 30 days of being a learner and passing the Class 6 road test. And I think in a sense, that call from Henry highlighted that it's a very common experience for many people to have a story where they lost somebody close to a motor vehicle accident. They know somebody that was in a terrible collision. So why are we still in a rush to get our licenses and to have that independence? Where is that disconnect? Mihai, what do you think about that?
I mean, yeah, like I said at the start, 300 people a year are killed in BC. That's a huge number. That's like if a Boeing plane crashed into YVR every year, we'd be sounding the alarm. We'd be doing something. I just want to add something that Han said about the ICBC backlog, which I completely agree with everything. That's their justification. Last year, ICBC had such a huge surplus, they gave back $400 million. They gave every driver in the province a $110 check. I mean, there's no point to doing that. If there's a backlog at ICBC, use that surplus to hire more people, open more offices in remote communities. It's just an excuse. That's what they need to do to solve that problem.
All right.
Good point.
We've got another call from Leah in Ladysmith. Hi, Leah.
Hi.
And what are your thoughts on this?
I absolutely disagree with lowering the standards like this. I believe that the standards should be increased and that driving should be considered to be a privilege that is earned. I think you should have to be tested every 10 years. I agree with that former comment of a caller. I also agree that if you are in a position like in Australia, for example, where you have had a surgery, you've had anesthetic, you're restricted from driving for 6 weeks. If you've had a baby, your body chemistry has changed. You should be restricted. You should be in a position where you're asking other people and entitled to have some breaks here. I also believe that because our terrain is so different, like driving in Vancouver is nothing like driving in Prince George or over the Coquihalla or up the Malahat.
Very true.
It should be regionally regulated. And if we increase this, it would be increased revenue for the province. You have to pay to take that test.
Fair. Thank you very much for that, Leah. And
You're welcome.
We are coming to the close here. We have had driving instructors that have come on and said that they feel that the test is just, perhaps just a snapshot in time. It's not a full idea of how somebody really is able to handle a vehicle. What are your thoughts on that?
Interestingly, this actually came up from the minister's speech before. She mentioned too.
Minister Krieger did say that.
Yeah, she mentioned it's just a snapshot. It doesn't prove anything. I have to respectfully disagree. I would make that example. We go to university, we go to all different kind of professional college. You have to pass an exam. You can't just say, oh, sorry, exam is only a snapshot, so it doesn't mean anything. Unfortunately, I think this is still a safeguard unless you have more data and more statistics showing that the second test is not meaningful. If your passing rate is 95% in first try, I would vote yes to it. But unfortunately, it's 68%.
All right, Mihai, what are your thoughts on the driving instructor and also the minister saying testing doesn't prove really much?
I mean, I don't understand the logic behind what the minister is saying. Like, if you're saying the 2 driving tests don't prove that you're a good driver, what's the point of going down to 1 test? Make it harder, not easier. Like, if you're already saying the status quo is not good enough, now you're going to make it even easier, that makes no sense to me.
All right. Certainly a lot of people with thoughts on this today. We've gotten a couple of emails. One from Javni says, how will the potential changes in licensing affect those currently holding N licenses and have already passed 2 years with a clear record? Will a test still be required, or will the N simply become the full class? And I do believe that those that have not yet taken the second test, if this legislature goes through, they will be able to
This bill actually went through already.
Oh, the bill has gone through. I apologize for that. So that is going to be in January of 2026. I thank you both for joining us today. Obviously, quite a hot topic. We had a lot of calls for the whole show. Not sure if anybody is fully in support of this, but we shall see. So thank you very much to both of you. That was MLA for Richmond Centre on Chan, and he is also the opposition critic for ICBC, and Mihai Cirstea from Zero Vision Vancouver. And a big thank you to everybody that joined the show today and added so much input. That is all the time that we have for our show for today.